Well, everybody, welcome to the session of the Progressive Power Summit titled How This Black Woman Won Her City Council Race While Working Full Time. So if you've been involved with MoveOn or any of the other progressive organizations, a lot of the work that we do is about electing progressive people. And I would consider Tiffany Thomas, our council member, Tiffany Thomas, one of those people. But there's another step up the activist ladder if you choose to do so, which is actually running for office. So this conversation is going to be a very casual one. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. Councilmember Thomas can see as well as I can what's coming in through the chat. And yeah, this is just going to be a very candid conversation.
Yeah.
So without further ado, Houston, my hometown, is the fourth largest city in the nation, home of the largest medical complex on the planet. It's the energy capital of the world, home of Beyonce as well. And it is governed by the mayor and Houston City Council, and one of those city council members is Council Member Tiffany Thomas. Tiffany Thomas, welcome, and can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you, and good morning for those on the west side. Good afternoon for those in the east. Thank you for the invitation. I'm honored that we can have this conversation because it's these type of conversations are not shared publicly. We don't talk about these things openly, so I appreciate that. So I know you mentioned Beyonce, but I got to give a shout out to Kelly Rowland. So I represent District F. It's one of the West Side districts, and so in District F, we have some power players that come out of the West Side. Lizzo, Kelly Rowland, Toby from the SWAT, catch him on the BET Awards on this Tuesday. Myself, Mo Amer, who just filmed this Netflix special in Houston, who's been touring with Dave Chappelle. So we have lots of talent. Houston is a hugely diverse city. And then today, once I leave here, I'm going to go celebrate Nigeria Independence Day. As you see, I got my dress on so we can get out. You know, the Nigerians, we party 24/7. So we'll be there to 4 a.m. So Tiffany Thomas ran in 2019 for city council, but I ran before that. So this is my second elected seat. And so similarly to many of you probably watching today, I didn't necessarily see myself as an elected official, and I didn't have that on my bingo board or in my yearbook when they say, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? For me, I was always conscious of issues that were happening because I would, be at the dinner table with my mom and dad. And I remember them talking about Anita Hill. And Clarence Thomas. I remember when President Bill Clinton was running for president and he was playing the saxophone on the Arsenio Hall show. I remember having, when Jesse Jackson ran for president. And so I was always paying attention to what was going on because of the conversations in my household. Once I got to college, I got really active on campus, and I was one of those student council class presidents in high school. But on campus, I really cut my teeth in with the student chapter of NAACP. I was second vice president. I, was chairing statewide conferences, networking with different campuses, and really understanding issues from an 18 to 24-year-old demographic on campus and in community. And so for my undergraduate, I attended a predominantly white institution, Sam Houston State University. And then for my graduate work, I went to historically Black college, Prairie View A&M, where I'm currently a full-time faculty member and program coordinator. So 2013, I was just in my community serving because that's just who I am. And at the time, the school superintendent created a leadership network. He was new to the district, and the conversation we would have, I mean, really, anytime you would see the district on the news, it was because somebody got robbed, somebody got shot, somebody failing, somebody doing something at them schools. And so he wanted to create this network of parents, former graduates, business, so we can really start talking about the success we were having with our fine arts, with our STEM. A lot of that was lost in the narrative. So subsequently, one of the trustees decided not to run for reelection. He had been there for probably 15 years, and wanted to be a grandpa. He was going, his grandbabies were growing up, and he wanted to spend his time. And actually, some trustees asked me to run. They said you would be a good trustee member, and I was like, "Are you out of your mind? To run for office? Absolutely not! Like what?" Now I had worked with candidates. I had raised money for candidates. I had done all of that. I have worked their tables. I've done voter registration, but I never saw myself, because that meant, the work that I was doing, I was always attached to a brand, right?
Mm-hmm.
An urban league, a sorority, the NAACP. I was always attached to something else. But this, I had to be on my own. It was going to be my name. And so I remember um, uh, sending an email like at 2 a.m. to some classmates. And it was like, listen, what y'all like, this is what they're asking me, what you think? And everybody was like, hell yeah, let's go. And so once I had the confidence of people, that my network, I felt like I would be supported. And that was a wild ride. I served 4 years. I did not run for reelection in 2017, much to many people's shock. And then I thought I was going to live my life. And then there was an opportunity for me to run in 2019. And so here we are. I showed up again, similarly with the same pattern, touching base with the network that originally supported me.
Absolutely. So take us back to the moment where, you're thinking about this, specifically your city council race. You're thinking about this, you've reached out to people, you've been involved, but um, it's not a guaranteed thing. And um, the district that you represent is very diverse. And if I'm not mistaken, had never been represented by an African American.
Correct. No, yeah. So I'm the first woman, the first African American, first under 40 at the time, to do it. And so and this is, and the part of the challenge was there were a lot of people who had an affinity for the neighborhood, but they didn't live in the neighborhood, right?
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
so were not eligible to vote, which is problematic. And so so for me it was um actually the community approached me to run for city council.
mm-hmm,
A group of residents, white, South Indian, Asian, Hispanic, took me out to dinner actually. And they were
mm.
like, so, and I just thought we was gonna go eat because I like to eat. So I was like, let's go. What's going on? Hey guys. And they said, listen, we are sick and tired of not having the representation that we deserve. Tiffany, you live here. You've served here before. We got you. Run. And I was like, no. And it's interesting because, particularly for women, women have to be asked 7 times to the one time a man has to be asked. They have to be
Mm-hmm.
convinced that they could actually do this, right? So I was like, absolutely not. Now, at this point, before running for office, I would say I was pretty much established. I had a network. I had a body of work that people knew, but I still had the doubt of, like, to your point, it's not a guaranteed deal. So the last person, the one who really underscored like I'm gonna do this was my dad. And I remember going to his house and I said, Daddy, these people want me to run for city council. Like, what in the world? And he was standing in his kitchen and he was like, shit, let's do it. And so once he said that, I was like, let's go. So I knew if my daddy was with it, I knew I would have what I needed, if nothing else. Because a lot of times women have to make concessions in their life, because they have so many other things attached to them. And my family was like, 10 toes down, let's go. Like, what we doing? So for me, that was the decision maker.
Mm-hmm.
And so once I filed, the incumbent did not file for reelection, so the seat became open. There were a total of 7 candidates. I was the only woman on the ballot.
Wow.
I know it was interesting. I was the only woman on the ballot, and it was definitely difficult. It was not an easy ride for sure.
Mm-hmm. And so you in Houston, you probably file for a treasurer, you declare yourself to be able to raise money and do all that stuff, but you started with $0. So for those people who are probably in the chat that are watching right now from across the United States, the idea of like asking people for money, not only the ones that you know, well, that you don't know, but even asking people in your network, how, like, what strategies, just starting off, did you use to do that?
No, for sure. And so for me, I had no issue asking for money because I understand, you'll hear a lot of people say, I'm with you. I support you. I got you. I don't know what that means. I have to buy t-shirts. I have to buy signs. I need to do robocalls. I don't understand. Like, define to me what your support means for me.
Mm-hmm.
When we know that women are not raising the same money as men, especially when you look at the dynamics of the seat. It was not expected for me. Like, I mean, I would hear so much chatter about, oh, she can't do that, and this seat belongs to this, and
Mm-hmm.
da da da. All that was moot point, and so I just was really direct. And so I want to encourage everybody who is watching that you have to get really, really comfortable about asking for the funds that you need in order to be successful. You can not only accept people's virtual support, right? It's one thing, to say, oh, I got you. And I'll tell you what, I touched every check. I picked up
Wow.
every check.
Wow.
Um, uh, every single one of them, because there were some people I didn't want their money. You see what I'm saying? There were some people I didn't want it.
There
And then there
you
were some people like, oh, no, no, baby, you're going to write this check, right? Because you're going to stack, because when I do win, right, you're going to be asking, you're going to be the first one trying to ask me for favors. You're going to be the
go.
first one trying to. So for me, it was a decision that in order for me to be successful, I'm going to leverage my network. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and I was very strategic and determined not to have everybody's money on my finance
Yeah.
report.
Yeah.
And I understand that some of you that are watching may not be able to make those decisions, because you are working full time. So I didn't loan myself. I gifted myself money to my campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to do that. But I'm also consumer debt free, right? So
Nice.
I still have student loans. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're thinking about launching, think about the financial commitment, one, that you're willing to give to your own campaign. And I'll tell you what, you'll be surprised. You don't have to worry about your personal network. When you are standing in integrity, people who you don't even know will show up, and then they will support
Wow.
you, because it'll be the people that you been in high school with, you know them, and they're not about to hit that link. You hear what I'm saying? They're not
Wow.
about to do it.
Wow.
It's people out here that they're watching your platform, they're seeing how you carry yourself, they're listening to what you have to say, and they're gonna be willing to write that check. And so for me, yes, when you're building it from ground up, you need to be really clear about your principles, because you will have people approach you about accepting their money. And if you're not clear on principles and ethics and your values, you'll be ashamed once that's reported. They'll go back to your finance report in the news, and they'll say, "Oh, well, she accepted the check from him who's doing the business with that one, so she must be in it
Mm-hmm.
too." And particularly
Mm-hmm.
for people of color, we don't get the same courtesies as anyone
Exactly.
else, right? So
Exactly.
you're already working against a historic narrative that we are criminals, that we're crooks, that we don't understand how to manage, we don't know how to do these things. So that's
Mm-hmm.
why it's really important in your profession to master certain skill sets that you can take politically, right? So master communication. You can be an introvert, but understand that when it's time to show time, people want to feel you and they want to touch you. I call it make love to the crowd. You got to
There you
make love to the crowd, and then you can go back home and sit in the corner and turn the lights off. I do
right.
that at time, okay?
Yeah.
But in your profession, because once you get onto this side, you don't have the same type of time. The expectation is that you know everyone on your finance report, and you should. That you know everyone who's coming in your office, and you should. So take the time before, as you build your campaign, on how you want to affiliate yourself. If you want to hire a campaign manager, I did not. I was not comfortable with someone else carrying my brand and name. I was not
Mm-hmm.
comfortable if they didn't know these streets like I knew these streets. You can't talk about anything better than me. And so if I have to
Mm-hmm.
train and coach you on that, then you don't need to be in this role. So I had volunteer support in other capacities. And I want y'all to start thinking about how you run your campaign and your operation, and where you're willing to give your money, because you got to pay those people. You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so if we're looking at a timeline here, how far away from the election did you have to make up your mind? Because I'm pretty sure you probably thought about it for a little bit, but what did that timeline kind of look like? If the
So
election was in November, so
Right. So you have to file, the earliest you could file your treasurer is January, February. So my
Hmm.
father was my treasurer previously. And I remember people, so-called politicals, telling me that I don't need to have my father as my, I need to have a name.
That's what they say.
I need to have a name. And I said, you don't understand. I'm his legacy. You don't understand. It's
Huh.
my name. I
Ah,
don't give up his name. My father gets the benefit of being on every single mail piece I do
ah.
because of I'm his daughter. You see what I'm
There you go.
saying?
There
And
you go.
so, and I don't have to go get the 65-year-old white male to be
Right.
attached to my name in order to
To give you
say,
validity. Yeah.
right.
To
And
give you
that's what they were saying. You need to change and you need to go get this person. Y'all better get out of my face.
huh.
Wilbur Thomas III will be on every piece because he gets the benefit of the hard work because I'm his legacy. And I think we owe it to our community to do that, that no one else has responsibility or can give you more success than the people who are going to support you without
Mm-hmm.
full stop. So that was April. So I announced in April of 2019. And so at that time, I believe you have until May to before they have to get
Mm-hmm.
ready for the ballot to print. And so I had announced, and people, I was close to the last person to announce. I think I was the last person, and they were like, all these people have announced, you need to get out there first. And I said, no, I'm clear about my timing.
Right.
I'm
Right.
clear about how this is going to happen. So you'll hear a lot of people attempt to tell you kind of this cookie cutter, but for many of
Mm-hmm.
you that are watching, you are entering races where they have never seen anyone like you before.
Mm.
That this is the first time that you're going to run a campaign that's going to be completely different than what they have seen. And so when I announced my candidacy, I led with the Bible scripture, and it was like, "Behold, I do a new thing. Can you not perceive it?" And so
Wow.
that's because my campaign was a new thing,
It,
right?
it yeah, it wasn't like so far everything that you talked about. Number one, you didn't follow the traditional structure of you got to have a campaign manager, and your reasoning was you don't want to just hand over that responsibility to someone, let them manage it, and then you're just and then the second thing that I found interesting, because I've heard this too, you want that name that's your treasurer to give you validity. And then the third thing being you held true to your principles and you touched every check.
Every
And
check.
so you filed now, and you're still working while running.
Yes.
So it probably started off cool. At what point? Take me to that climax, that day where it was like, whoo, like what? When did it hit?
So after Labor Day, so it's cool. All of 2019, it's cool. So I'm a faculty member. I teach in the community development program at Prairie View. We are the only HBCU with the community development program. I'm in the only institution in Texas. So here's the deal: I teach introduction to community development politics, um, community research. So my classrooms ultimately turn into community labs, right?
Huh?
And my students are ultimately extensions of the work that I do. So I assigned them the stuff in the district.
Right.
However, after Labor Day, game change because you're
Wow.
moving into that last quarter of
Yes.
2019 where you have to get out there because you have a one big last fundraising push. You have your June, then you have your October, and then you go into general election November, and then possibly a runoff if you can make it. So the block was hot in 2019. It was literally all a blur. But one of the things is that I'm deeply passionate about my students. These are like grown children of mine, and so what intensified was because I invest so much in them. I'm very hands on with them in their learning. Is that they still wanted that same type of attachment when I needed to be
Mm-hmm.
working the polls. You see what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying? And I would be like, if you want faculty hours, listen, come meet me at the voting location and we could do this, but I have to be on my square.
Right.
I still had obligations to committees. I still had obligations to all of the stuff that I signed up as a professional for the institution. And so, yeah, it was definitely a conflict. If my dean called a meeting,
You had to
I
be there.
needed to be there, which means no, I wasn't going to be at such and such as luncheon and spend my time. And so one of the things that worked for me, and I hopefully this can encourage some of y'all, during the campaign, you will be offered all types of opportunities to go to luncheons and meetings because they want, we're going to announce you in the room, but you have to I ultimately decide what's worth your time and what's the exchange. Because I remember other candidates that you meet, and I had colleagues who were running in various city positions, how they would spend their time in their hard-earned campaign funds on external events that had no transaction ultimately for their work. So some of the things that
Mhm.
I did, I was intentional about. I did all of my campaign business within my district. The person who printed my T-shirts, my signs, my mails, all of that, they were in the district. They were Black, they were woman, they like
Mhm.
their kids were in the area. They still had their home, and I got heat for that too. And I said, I'm going to demonstrate what investing in my district looks like by taking the campaign funds that people entrusted with me
And putting it right
and
back
flip
in.
it back in the neighborhood. Because we can't talk about economics and we can't talk about revitalization if I'm not willing to do that here with these people. And I
Right,
did it.
right.
And so people got really clear about that. Anything that I needed, I made sure that it was in my district. So it was easier for me,
Mhm.
right, to build those relationships.
And if we could pause right there, you said something that I think is a nugget. So you see these y'all that are in the chat have probably been to these events, these luncheons. They're 2 hours long, and people actually candidates will pay their money to attend, and all they get is, we want to recognize Rachel Singh, and you stand up, you wave, and you sit down. Maybe you have a staffer in there that's passing out lit, but what you said was you were intentional about how you spent your time. If
Mhm.
it wasn't worth it, you'd rather be in your district doing something to move the meter towards victory than what looks, like these luncheons and other little things like
Yeah,
that.
and it's chatter, right? And I mean, I got so much flack. Like, she thinks she all that. She don't
Yes.
wanna. I got all of that. So what? I was like,
Yeah.
none of y'all even know about the West Side. And I frankly, I'll tell you this. I stopped screening with a lot of groups because I would go in there and I'm like, well, tell me what you know about District F. Tell me what you know about the West. And they'd be like, I don't know. Tell us where the district was at. So the moment that they would say, well, tell us like tell me about your district, I was like, man, I don't have time for this. I'm not here to convince you of anything. I'm convincing these people. So
Exactly.
for me, it was like, this is not where my currency lies. So yes,
Right.
so when you're building your campaign, and I get it, you're in a very vulnerable position. You want people to like you. You want to come out as a leader. You want to have the advantage of touching as many people. But what I was really surprised to know that when you go to these things, no one's in your no one's even in your district because the people who are voting for you are at home, are at work.
Right.
If
Right.
you're dealing with
It,
the same economic demographics I'm dealing with, they're not
exactly.
there.
And another thing that's interesting too, a lot of these got this luncheon on Monday, this one on Wednesday, this one on Friday, this one on Saturday. It's the same 100 people, 90 of whom don't live in your district, and it's just a hodgepodge of moving, shuffling around, and you're not really expanding.
You're not really expanding, and really what it's a manipulation of the candidate, and
Yes,
the candidate really needs to be protected. So you have to see yourself as that and look at how are you going to get to those neighborhoods that no one else has gotten to. How are you going
absolutely.
to really, communicate and spend time? Because what you're doing at a luncheon that you spent $250 from your campaign funds to do, you could have been having coffee with some of the neighborhood ladies.
Exactly. Who could actually change some things? Shelly Gooden says, love, true. Patrice Wright Kitchen says, this is good stuff. Being intentional within your community, your district, very important. Gwendolyn Coleman says, she is true to herself, family, and community. She is very hands-on, powerful, awesome, and investing back into her district. She got what it takes to be successful. Kenya Leon says, intention, not performative. So that is really huge. So let me ask you, as we're inching closer to election day, um, was it slam dunk? I got this, or
No.
was it Whew, let's see what's gonna happen.
High anxiety. No, no slam dunk. And no, now did I believe in my core that I was the most qualified? Absolutely. But still high anxiety. We was fighting at the polls. I posted
Yeah.
on Facebook one time. I said, child, we out here kung fu fighting. It was going down. So I mean, at that time, when you get to early vote, and then once we made it to the runoff, the general election in November, fighting at the polls. We make it to the party or whatever, and we make it to the runoff. I'm exasperated,
Yes.
because I was like, Daddy, I don't think I have it in me to do this for 2 more weeks.
Yes.
Like I literally physically was hitting a wall, and he was like, "You got it, you can do it." Like I just didn't know where the energy, because you pushed so hard to November, that
Right.
runoff, it was killer. But it wasn't until probably election day on that Saturday that I felt like my ancestors, every good thing was surrounding me, and I
Yeah.
felt good. Like it
Yeah.
was a pretty day. The weather
Yes.
was perfect. It was a crisp December Saturday, and I went to each poll location. And I worked them. And so I put my heavy hitters at the big one, and then the
Yeah.
ones where we didn't have covered, I worked them. So I was there quiet, and I was there by myself, and they would be like, Tiffany, and I'm like, that's me. Let's go. And people would show up to the polls like, baby, I got you. Like,
Right.
I'm here. And so I went to the places where we didn't have coverage, because I needed to get my mind right. I needed to kind
Yeah.
of quietly pray and be like, oh Lord, are we gonna do
Right.
this? Oh Lord, you're gonna embarrass me. What's going to happen? Lord,
Right.
take me. And so we did it. But I'll tell you, it was when the last 30 minutes of voting, and it closed at 7 o'clock that night. I made it to the main polling location. My family's there, everybody pulling up. And then we was just one of my good neighborhood captains. He's from Sierra Leone. And he walk around with a machete, y'all. He's crazy. It's just look, that's why they called the cops on us, okay? Um, but he started doing his African dance, and we just all started just dancing, and it was just good. Like we just felt good. They was like, this is yours, like you got it. Like,
Yeah.
and I felt good. And so
Yes.
runoff, it happened. That moment was just a really holy moment. Like we did it for the people, and people showed up, and they felt like
Mm-hmm.
I was for the people. So that for me was the climax, that 30 minutes before the polls
Mm.
closed.
Rachel Singh asks, how did you get to the voters? Like how did you communicate and win people
Oh,
over?
I beat the block. See, what I'm committed to is that you will not work me. So while you spending money at those luncheons, I got a backpack on with some ice water, a
Wow.
hoodie on, and I'm knocking on doors. And I blocked walked. I touched more doors than a little bit, and I was committed
Yeah.
to that. See, so and I would talk to other candidates, and even some who were on the ballot with me, and they weren't
Right.
doing that, right? Because we have romanticized being a
Yes.
candidate, and
Yes.
we've limited to what we put on social media. So while
Yeah.
we were making social media pretty, I also had my direct mails and all of the traditional things, but I also had a me, and even if no one else showed up, I was going to show up, and I was going to knock on those doors,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of your language, and put that flyer down and put it in your hand. And
Mm-hmm.
people will show back up to the polls and say, you came to my house.
Right.
You know,
Right.
so don't like, and so that's why it's so important for you to have a body of work where you have mastered your issues, where you've done this work. So in my other lives, in my other work, I was not like knocking on doors wasn't like new for me.
Mm-hmm.
I already, like, it wasn't.
Did you
So
grow to like it? Did you grow to as you were knocking on doors? Did you grow to like it more, the communicating with
I
people?
I've always I prefer the, like, I will do the block walking thing. I have no problem phone calling
Mm-hmm.
and block walking. So I'm very self-sustained in that way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
like if y'all, so if you're thinking about it, you got to get over that or create something to get over that mental block, because
Mm-hmm.
people want engagement, particularly in districts and areas where they have not had
Right.
vocal and prepared leadership on their behalf. And if that's you, you need to be ready to be touched and to be engaged. And so get comfortable with the idea of people wanting to pull on you and people
Mm-hmm.
wanting you to have information, because you'll probably be the only person they get to talk to.
Right. And I could imagine I remember somebody knocking on my door, and this was like years ago before I even got into stuff. But I was at grandma's house, and they knocked on the door, and it wasn't someone saying, "Hey, I'm a volunteer for this person." It was that person, and my granny was just like, she stopped what she was doing because she just could not believe that the candidate was knocking on the door. And so that is huge.
Yeah.
Someone, Giselle Gutierrez, says that they're not from Texas and they hear that no one will vote for them because they're from California. Any advice on that? Like not being from um, the state or the place where um,
Listen, I think in the Houston, particularly in Texas, you got more people from, that are
yeah,
not Houstonians than are. And I
yeah,
think you got to think critically about how do you make that a part of your story, right? So you'll
mm-hmm,
often hear people saying, I got to Texas as fast as I could, right? But then
mm-hmm,
how do you make that a part of your story and how you've invested yourself in your local neighborhood, how you become an asset, and then why you're asking your neighbors? Because the reality is that you're a Texan now, or you're
yes,
whatever now. This is where
yep,
you pay your taxes, honey. And so you have just as much say so with that and wanting to have the ability to run and represent your neighbors. And so I think
mm-hmm,
you can be creative and really think through how
mm-hmm,
have you been invested since you've been here.
mm-hmm. You talk a lot about your father and your family stepping up to it. This was not only like a big decision for you, but also for them, and probably because like I could imagine like you've probably seen a bunch of other campaigns, so you knew better what to expect. But for those relatives who didn't, like did you talk to them about that? Like, hey, I'm about to be on this post and you may be impacted because you know
Yes, it's a real thing. I didn't have that. I mean, I asked for their support because I knew that I would need it. But I
hmm
did not. I don't think none of us knew what to expect from that. So
hmm
my brother, my cousin, like they would say people would, try to become their friend because they wanted
yeah,
to get close to me.
yeah, yeah.
My daddy would think he was famous. So I put my daddy on, he was on one of my direct mail pieces. And so he says, "Yeah, I was at Walmart and that lady was looking at me. I think you got your mail. She was staring at me." I was like, "Daddy, please." So so people, when the Texas froze over, people were knocking on his door. Like, your daughter's a councilwoman. What's going on with this power? He said, "Ain't no power," and would shut the door in their face.
Wow.
hmm It was crazy. So yeah, but I knew I would have their support, but they really served as additional surrogates.
hmm
I grew up in a very diverse neighborhood. My father still stays there, and to the right of the home is a Vietnamese neighbor. We've known them since we've moved there. Across the street is African, and then El
hmm
Salvadoran across. Like, we know all their kids, and all of them were like, "Where's our sign? You our daughter too." Like, and so
Wow.
we had signs all up and down the street. Even the neighborhood boys. Listen, the neighborhood boys on at the gas station were wearing my shirt. It was like wild. So
Right.
yeah, my family became just as popular.
hmm
And they had to realize, like, oh, you're trying to get to my sister. Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Yeah.
What's one thing you wish you knew before deciding to run?
There's been so many mollywops in 2020,
hmm
2021. I'm not sure. I think that part I'm still figuring out, honestly,
hmm
because I won in 2019. I was sworn in January 4th. A month and a half later, we shut down the
I
rodeo in
didn't
Texas.
think about that. I
I
didn't even
I
think about
didn't get it was coronavirus. I literally had just got a key to my office maybe a month, like in January, like February. And so I was thrown right back into the community in terms of response, disaster, PPE, food. I'm a junior member. The mayor appointed me chair of housing. We immediately went into a rent relief eviction crisis in the city. But because that's my training and my research and the work that I do,
hmm
it's a fit.
hmm
But I've been, I mean, literally, literal hits. the death of Houston, the murder of Houston native George Floyd. I will tell you, I learned more about police there during that time and how we operated as a city and public safety and our money than my intention from what I was campaigning on. Public safety, of course, was a part of that, but it was public safety from the standpoint of revitalizing and investing in our communities from street lights, green space, because all of those things are connected. So I think I'm still learning that piece because I didn't have a normal transition to elected office.
When I'll never forget seeing watching you and your dad walk on inauguration day across the stage. When did it actually set in? I remember for you, it was seeing your picture at Bush Intercontinental.
That's when yeah.
I was like, damn,
she's up there. Like,
when was that for you?
I think it was during inauguration that I was like, so this is really happening. Huh. Wow. Yeah. Like it just didn't. It didn't. And then, a part of it is that I still struggle with the fact that I'm an elected official. Like sometimes I don't. So that's why I account for some of my facial expressions because they want you to be so scripted.
Yeah.
And I'm not. And so I'm hearing things just like you would hear them. Like, what? That's crazy.
I live for your expressions. I think at one point you were before they shut it down and they had y'all just spread out and they had you like wherever your thing was. I think the person would be speaking and you were like right there. I think.
Yeah, so I'm in like right when it turns. I'm right there in the corner next to Kuba.
Yeah. And so like, yeah, you do. Your facial expressions are authentic.
They are. I mean, because I don't kind of subscribe to that. Now that you're elected, you're not a human, and that you don't.
This is so refreshing. It is refreshing, y'all.
I just don't understand that because you'll see me at the post office. I'm at the grocery store. Like my neighbors, they'll be like, hey, my neighbors put notes on my car, sticky notes, and they'll say, hey, Miss Tiffany, what's going on with these lights? Lady, I don't know. Right. So, but I think that if you're going to talk about public government and public management, especially when we are in crisis or disaster, even if you say, I don't have the answer to that problem, but they are able to read that you are genuine, like this is real, they will be like, okay, but I know you with me, right? And then on the other side of that, sometimes you gotta like pop somebody real quick just for them to know not to play me because because of your youth.
Right.
Because of what they perceive as experience. And I remember I had a real heated housing committee meeting and some of the senior council members was like, listen, I've been here a long time. It was like, you're probably the one of the most prepared council, like chairs of the housing committee, like we have never. And so it was refreshing to know because one, I can't embarrass my name. So I'm going to make sure that I'm fully prepared. But I think that, people need to see the humanity in that. And then what that also allows is for people to know that, we are human. So we experience, like I was learning stuff about COVID the same time y'all were, right? Like I would see it on the press conference and be like, oh, so that's what we're doing. Got it. So it's to kind of dismantle the idea that everyone's in cahoots and everybody knows. And like, no, I don't know. I don't know. This is new information. I need to process that. So it's okay to have your personality because the natural thing that shines is what's going to have folks remember you. So if you are demonstrative, listen, I talk with my hands. I do all of that. People have told me that I don't need to do that anymore. Not to wear red lipstick when I give a speech. I've been listen, let's just talk about these.
Yes.
Let's just talk about this as an elected official, right? All of these things that I intentionally and actively try to break. So you will see me with braids down my back. You might see me with the wig. You will see me with hoop earrings on,
Yes.
because
Yes.
I am my peers and I am my generation.
Yes. Yes. It's interesting. It reminds me of Mandela Barnes, who's Lieutenant Governor of Wisconsin, who was endorsed by MoveOn and Senator Elizabeth Warren, and who will be the next U.S. Senator from the state of Wisconsin. And and you're very authentic as well. I love him. He has his beard, you know, he wears his fitted hat, he wears his J's, and I'm
With his
like,
suit, yes.
that's what people need to also see, and it's that authenticity that really, really rings true. Rings true.
Because I want other people to know that you don't have to wear a suit. I'll rarely wear a suit. I wear dresses. I wear all that. But
Mhm.
I want them to see themselves in government. I want them to see themselves making high decisions, because that's the problem today. We have propped up images and
Yep.
candidates that are
Yep.
stoic, sterile, and they're not, and
Mhm.
they don't even look like they connect with the neighborhood. They couldn't
Right.
even walk through these streets, right? So
Right.
when I know I'm in a certain part of my district, if I'm in A-Leaf,
Mhm.
you might see me with some J's on or some,
Right.
you
Right.
see what I'm saying?
Right. Right.
In a hoodie, because they're gonna be
Right.
like, yeah,
Right.
that they
Exactly.
trust it. They trust it.
Exactly.
Because everyone who's come to them wearing the shiny suit and the briefcase has betrayed them politically.
Exactly.
And so
Exactly.
they need to know that somebody that we support. I remember, so we did something, side note. So Toby, we were somewhere. He was like, Tiff, I feel like I'm at City Hall because you at City Hall. Like the streets, like I feel like, and it felt good because it was
Yeah.
like the people in the neighborhood feel like they have a real representative. So much to the point that the dope boys, the gang members, text me
Right.
and they'll be like, Miss Tiffany, can you send some cops over there? The kids fighting. Miss
Right.
Tiffany, can you
Right.
send some
Right.
resources over there? Because they're comfortable enough because they
Right.
know that I'm real,
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. And so for the person who is probably in this chat right now, that is really thinking about it, they don't know where to even start, and maybe they've never technically done any of the other things that you've done, because before you ran, you did other things. Like, looking back, you can see the trajectory.
Mhm.
Where does someone start?
Sure. I think you start there. So I think you ask yourself, like, what's the thing that pisses you off? What's
Hmm.
that one thing that pisses you off? And then you start to master that. Um, Whatever that may be, housing inequity, criminal justice, women's rights, all of those things. And of course, depending on the level of government that you want to run on. I think a lot of times people think, if you understand your municipality, particularly in Houston or Texas, local government is public safety, trees, water, flooding, right? We get to do some other fancy stuff, but we don't necessarily have a say so on how certain things happen.
Hmm.
Master that, your broader general population issues. Make sure that you're speaking exactly to the core of the responsibility you're asking to, and master that. I had the ability to master and understand um, housing and economic development policy because of my work with the Urban League. At that time, I had volunteered with them during Ike, Katrina, Rita, talking, getting families placed into housing, and then realizing why there were gaps in homeownership, and realizing through this work why there's gaps around foreclosure when the economy in 2011 fell out the belly of the well. So I think in 2007, I'm sorry, in 2007. So figure out that one thing that pisses you off and master that, because once you get to this side you won't necessarily have all the space and time to learn it.
Hmm.
And what you don't want to do is depend on some third party group to put a sheet of paper in front of you where you just become the talking head and you don't have comprehension of the work that you're doing, right? So it's one thing to be familiar and to grab your talking points, but to master and to comprehend is a totally different game.
Right.
Totally different game. And so get comfortable in doing that work. Get comfortable in not being the one with your name on it. And I know in the younger generation we want to be seen and we want to have a seat at the table, but I am an example and a testament that when you work in the back and when you understand what's in the closet and how all of it, the sausage is made, you will get your seat at the front. And let me tell you this, I miss the days when nobody knew my name. You hear what I'm saying? I
Yeah.
miss the days when, and I'll tell you this: when George Floyd protests were happening in the city of Houston, it ain't always rosy. This is the
Right.
most that we've elected, the most blacks in this city. They had
Mm-hmm.
my people had my face on a flyer encouraging people to protest my house. Child, police. And I said,
Wow.
I wish y'all would show up here. Okay. I
Wow.
wish you
Wow.
would show up here. And so we're gonna play
Yeah.
that game.
Yeah.
Then let's
Yeah.
play. But it's
Yeah.
those types of things that you give up. And so I mentioned about romanticizing this.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I heard a sermon Bishop Jakes once preached, and he says, with every blessing, there's a burden. And you got to
Yes.
get comfortable in understanding that there's a burden that comes with this work.
Yes.
Listen, we don't get no perks because it's
Right.
2020. Ain't no perks, ain't no
Right.
football games, ain't no ball
Right.
games. It's
Right.
coronavirus. We are doing work, work, work.
Right. And you are now in a position where more people know you than you know people. So
Correct.
like for me, if I notice someone in the store, they also notice me or vice versa. You now have like you can't just you sort of lost that
I've lost it.
anonymity.
And
What
that's what I wrote on my notes when you emailed me. And I was like, uh, you know, you lost it. It's gone. I get tagged on social media about nonsense, and I'm like, what? Like, how y'all pull me into that? Like, that's that with that GIF, that Nene Leaks GIF. And they be like,
yeah.
what? I ain't even do nothing. Like, what y'all? I ain't even do nothing. Like, how you get my name in it? And so, yes, it's right. Like, they know you.
Right.
My car was keyed during election. My car was keyed. They cut my face on signs, and those things come with it, right? But
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's important for you to understand your values, know that you're living in integrity,
Yes.
and that you're living with character, and that even if you don't have the information, I think people will be fine to know that you're willing to go get it and figure it out with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this: now that you're an elected official, you've had to make votes. You're now on the other side of people wanting you to vote a certain way or people reaching out to you. What has really worked from constituents? So for those people who are in the chat right now, who are activists, who are MoveOn members that are reaching out to their members of Congress and this and that, what actually works, and then what doesn't really work?
So I think for our members that are watching, there's some decisions you have to make. Do you want to govern or do you want to be an activist? Those are two distinctly different
Mm-hmm.
things.
Mm-hmm.
Two different things, and the costs are different, right? And so if
Mm-hmm.
you when you transition to this side, it's different. The unfortunate thing, and I think maybe it's on purpose, but I think now there's a higher demand for transparency and information sharing at the local level about how we do our business. And I think we've witnessed that throughout the whole nation with George Floyd and looking at budgets and how we spend, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so that is translating to other areas in city government. City government has not been established for real public engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And so the challenge is how do we effectively get the information to people for them to fully digest what they need to know in order to give us what their feedback is. Every week in my newsletter, I put out my pop-off comments, I send the
Mm-hmm.
agenda. This is what's happening. I highlight the stuff that is just in the district. I ask for feedback. I don't get none.
Mm-hmm.
I don't get
Wow.
none. Now, the other part of it is that they trust me enough to make I
Mm-hmm.
decisions with integrity. But the other part is I need your feedback on a water fee, y'all. We got to
Right.
pay this. Y'all don't have
Right.
nothing to say. So we're working to encourage participation at a community level where they have not historically participated in because they didn't
Mm-hmm.
feel they had a trusted relationship. So we're now coaching people to that. But it's definitely tough because we vote every week. So every week we're on to something else every week.
Absolutely.
And it's a lot.
Absolutely.
And it's a lot.
Absolutely. And with 1 minute left, uh, Council Member Thomas, any closing thoughts or closing words?
Well, I'm always humbled to share in front of virtual friends or friends in person. And if I can ever personally be a resource, please allow me to be. I remember when I was, seeking and asking questions, and I wanted a confidential voice and just a sounding board, because clearly if you're in this type of organization doing this work, you don't need assistance with making decisions. You need support around the decisions you've made. And that was advice that a mentor gave me that I want to, extend to everyone else. Please allow me to do that. I know my time in this seat is temporary. I'm term limited. And so my number one job is making sure I have an adequate replacement, or that I support someone else in their pursuit of this. And I'm very committed to that. Thanks for having this conversation. Know that it can be done. And until we, and if you are pursuing your career, get clear about the policies and the ethics around running for public office. If there's a conflict, and I'm willing to have that conversation if you want to dive deeper into that, but it's worth it. And so for many of you, you'll pull the trigger now. Some you'll pull it in a couple of years, but it's definitely worth it. And this is probably the highest calling I've had on this earth, is to serve people and to serve people with passion and full commitment. And so, if nothing else, I would like for them to say, she did what she said she was going to do for us. So I appreciate the invitation, and thank y'all for joining us in the chat room.
Can people follow you on Instagram?
Oh yeah, I don't have an Instagram because it's just too much. I forget passwords. Don't judge me. But I'm on Twitter, and I'm at Tiffany for A Leaf, TIFFANY FOR ALIEF, and I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn. So Facebook is Tiffany D. Thomas.
And Jeffrey Perone says, very inspiring. Rachel Singh says, thank you, Ms. Thomas. This was badass. Maja Sandstorm says, I'm keeping this quote with me. With every blessing comes a burden. Councilwoman Tiffany Thomas. Chuck Tyler says, you don't need assistance in making decisions. You need support for the decisions you've already made. That one hit me too, Chuck. And thank you so much. And for those of y'all that are considering running for office, MoveOn has a sort of a ladder. There's actually a campaign trying to put a candidate in every seat, a progressive candidate in every seat, and just step out there. I don't know if I ever told you this, Councilwoman Thomas, but I used to work for the prison system for 5 years. And based on what I saw there, I was like, oh, I want to get out and do something, right? So I ended up, falling into the right place at the right time to be able to, get my first campaign gig that paid. And then I saved, and I reached out to different state reps and I said, I want to work this next legislative session. I'll do it for free. Let me work for you for 2 months for nothing. They were like, for nothing, right? I'll come, I'll prove myself. And I just rolled the dice. And so I would encourage anyone who's out there, to roll the dice and do as Councilwoman Thomas did. And again, thank y'all so much for being here. Thank you for taking the time out to do this. I know you've changed some lives. Somebody's going to put this conversation in their bio that they were inspired to run because of the conversation we had today. And with that, see y'all later.
Bye-bye.